Welcome to Anthology Training. In this series, we're going to be going over changes in version 9.6. Particularly for this topic, we're going to be going over some changes to cash register, FBC Tender usage, and some changes to customer functions. And for this particular demo, we'll be using version 9.6.59. So in the cash register, historically, you've had this F4 Sell Gift Certificate button, and since most stores these days are using the plastic gift cards, there's an option now to swap the buttons so that you don't have to use the Actions menu for gift card activation. You'll have a button right on the cash register screen, and I'll show you where that's at over in the Tools options. So under Tools options, under the Cash Register tab, is this new option for Show Sell Gift Card button. And this is the setting you would use to swap in the cash register screen that you'd rather see the Activate gift card versus the Sell gift certificate. So once I go into Tools options and make a change, I do have to save that and close out and reopen just to have those changes take effect. So now that I've changed the setting in Tools options for the cash register, you'll see now my cash register screen has the Alt F4 Activate GC gift card button. A second change that they've made in the cash register is the F12 Resume Sale. That form now also has a delete or remove all button. So if you have a lot of transactions that have kind of collected over the last few years and you don't need to keep these things around, they're just junk anyway, you can do delete, remove all. And it will warn you once these are chosen to be deleted, they cannot be recovered. So just make sure you're positive you want to remove everything from this list if you're going to use this option. I'll go ahead and say yes, remove all those entries. And there's my resume sale window has now been emptied out. A third thing in relation to cash register that's shifted a little bit is there is now an option in Tools Options under the General tab for both to display the running total, sort of a grand total that just accumulates over time. You can, normally that is going to show up on the Z-tape, but now you have an option to even just hide it if that's not something you want to see on your Z-tape, or maybe periodically, maybe once a quarter or at the start of a new year, you want to reset that running total. And I'll show you what mine looks like in a moment here. If I run my Z-tape, or we'll do, say, historical Z-tape, my historical Z-tape will show me that running grand total at the very end, and that's been there for some time. But in case you don't want to see that detail, if that's not important to you, you can just go to the Tools Options General tab and uncheck that option or do the reset. A fourth thing that they have changed a little bit is in the cash register screen, and also from the customer record, but usually you're in the cash register when you're first working with a customer, is now when you create a new customer record, the last name is not a hard requirement. So you could put a first name in, and that's never been a hard requirement. Previously, you had to have at the very least a last name and a short code. But now you can opt to have just a short code and the organization. It no longer requires you to have a last name. As long as you have a last name or the organization, that will be sufficient to ring out that customer. So in relation to Frequent Buyers Club, or FBC, there has been a slight shift in how the cash register, at the time they are taking tenders, there's a slight change in both a warning message and how it's going to automatically try to apply that frequent buyers club. And this is in the case of a save to file situation where perhaps my club is buy $100 to get maybe a $7 credit saved to the customer record, not as a coupon, but actually saved to the customer record. So in my customers, I have 2 customers that I've set up in advance here. One is called Full FBC. And you can see that this customer has already triggered at least one reward. They show an FBC balance. That's the reward of $7. And in this case, when it's a full situation, let's say that customer, maybe they've bought a $10 item and they have the $7 FBC, meaning they could use all of that FBC in one shot to pay for some of that transaction. So I'll ring up my item and we'll take tenders. So the moment you do F3 take tenders or hit enter on the tender line button and I say yes, so I do want to begin take tenders, because there is enough to totally cover that FBC, or excuse me, to cover the entire sale or part of that sale, it's just going to automatically select my FBC tender, and it's going to move the focus down to the amount tendered field, showing you the grand total, the total amount that they could apply to that FBC. So we'll say enter. And now I would just pay off the rest of the transaction with whatever additional tender they're going to give me. So that's a slight shift in behavior. Before, it would automatically put in that FBC tender, but you would see it already on the right-hand side of the tape area instead of it pausing at that FBC tender and showing you the dollar amount. If this was a case of the customer having more FBC amount available than the total sale is, we will put a warning message up. So in this case, I did the full FBC. Let's do the sum. So here's my sum FBC customer. And in this case here too, you can see that they have a $7 FBC balance. They've already earned that reward. So let's say that we're going to do a small item, maybe a $3 item, but yet we have an FBC balance of $7. The moment I do F3 take tenders, it's going to pop up a warning message basically to say this entire sale could be paid totally by the FBC. Do you want to go ahead and just automatically apply it and then move forward, basically completing the sale? Or no, for some reason the customer today does not want to use either any of their FBC, or maybe they just want to use a very small amount, maybe just $1 out of it. And in this case, I do want to go ahead and pay for the entire transaction with their full outstanding FBC balance. So I'll say, yes, we want to apply the full reward. And you can see, because there was enough tender to cover the entire sale, it's just automatically going to the complete part of the transaction. I'll go ahead and say, yes, complete that sale. And then there's my receipt to print out. So the last little detail we wanted to go over is some changes to the customer area. Now we've already seen how in the master files customers, or when you're in, say, cash register, that the last name field is not a hard requirement. You can, at the very least, have either a last name or the organization as the required value. Another area we've made some changes is now when you do the F11 print from the customer area, you'll now see that we are including the salutation and the country as well. And that's going to be listed as bill country or ship country. Now, the last change I want to go over in this first little training video on 9.6 is a new set of tools regarding customers. In Master Files Customers, once you've selected some customer records, let's say you want to fix everybody, maybe their the state or zip code is incorrect, or you just have a list of customers, maybe from MailChimp or Constant Contact, any of those outside newsletter type systems where maybe you've been collecting customer contact info and you want to bring that data into Anthology to make sure you've got up-to-date contact information in your Anthology system as well. So in the Master Files Customers area, when you're on the List tab, if you mass highlight a chunk of records, maybe you want to get everybody, maybe you want to get some people, maybe you want to use a query ahead of time to focus on only fixing contact information for those customers that are good purchasers. But once you've selected a group of records, either some or all of them, and you go to the Actions menu, you'll see at the bottom there's now two options: Export Customer Records and Import Updated Customer Records. The first part is you want to export these records, and this is going to let you choose where you want to save the file to. I'm just going to choose to put it right out to my working directory. And then this is going to export the customer contact information to an Excel spreadsheet. So I'll say Export and Post, and there is a warning here that comes up. It is basically saying that there is a ID customer value, something you don't normally see. You will see that sometimes when you're doing a merge customer, but that ID customer is critically important. If you're going to use this export customer tool to clean up address information, fix contact information like emails, such and such, the file we export is going to include that very critical ID customer value. It's important to not change that value at all. Remember, if you're in Excel or OpenOffice or Google Docs, whichever you prefer to use, when you sort a group of records, if you've not selected all the fields, you could sort by, say, first name, but leave the ID customer unsorted. So you would get those records out of sync. So just make sure that you're very careful about not changing that ID customer and not losing that value for the return trip when you're bringing that detail back in. When you do this kind of change and you mass import changes into your customer record, there is no changing back unless you restore data. So it would be a good idea to maybe ensure you've done a recent backup before you do this kind of big change. But I'll go ahead and say OK on that warning message. And so now it's exporting those customer records to an Excel file. And I will go locate that file. And I just had it go out to my Anthology directory. So here's my file. It does put in the file name of customers and then the date you exported it. So I'll go ahead and open that up in my Excel spreadsheet tool, or again, OpenOffice, Google Docs. There's a few other tools out there to massage spreadsheets with. Let me just make this a little more viewable. So I'm looking right now at my exported list of customers that I exported from Anthology, and now I want to fix some details. Perhaps these are folks who should be in Traverse City. And in fact, the beauty of Excel, I can go in and mass highlight and then very quickly paste. Same thing, maybe the state needs to be a little more uniform. You can see in this case, this is lowercase versus uppercase, not major, but enough of a distraction that it would be good to make sure everybody has the capitalized MI. Same here, I can go in and say these should all be listed as the nice clean USA instead of a mesh of U.S.USA US itself. So you can use this export tool to do some cleanup and fix your data structures a little bit, or rather the content of your customer contact information. And you can see that we include all the fields for the billing, the shipping, the phone number, the cell phone, the email address, those UDF fields that maybe you use in the background, those additional user fields, such as kids' birthdays or maybe what school the kid is attending, that kind of stuff. And you'll see here, this first column, this is that very critical ID customer. So you'll see that my customer called New Guy Offsite, his ID is 156, and that ID is something you find in the Details tab. So we'll look for our customer called Joe, and then his last name is called New Guy Offsite, and you'll see in the Details tab that ID customer, that very critical ID is right here, and in this case 156. Again, that's the critical ID that Anthology uses to identify a customer by. So just make sure that when you're using that export tool and when you import that you've not changed the ID customer value. Once I've made these changes, it would be good to save this to a slightly different file name, just so I can keep track of when did it export and what did I send back in. So I can do a file save as, and I will just put in like maybe a B or some kind of note that, you know, it's been updated. So I know exactly what went out and what came back in. I'll go ahead and save that change. So now I can close my screen. And in Anthology, to bring back in those changes, I'll go back up to my Actions menu, and you'll see there's the Import Updated Customer Records. And now I do see this pop-up window for the importing. That's kind of your management tool of the imports. I do need to first do F6 get and choose the file that I just updated. Notice there's my original export. Here's the one that I imported, or the one I updated. So I'll pick those records. So it's going to show me all the customers that were in that file. And then it's also going to show me in red the changes that I made. So here's that Joe record. I added the billing city of Traverse City for him. And also for some of the other records, I added the Michigan state or cleaned it up. Same thing for the USA. So you'll see in red any of the changes, any of the differences. And again, it's very important. Use that ID customer value to ensure that the changes you made on the export are for the same intended customer when you're coming back in. So use this up here just to kind of spot check and make sure that none of those IDs have shifted, and just kind of spot check to make sure, yep, these are all the changes I wanted to do. Great, I'm happy with those. Now I'm going to do F12 update post. And again, this is going to warn you that once you do this, it's permanent. You cannot go back unless you restore from, say, last night's transactions, meaning you might lose that day's transactions if you do the restore. So this is something you probably want to do either before the store opens or maybe after the store closes outside of normal business hours. And there we go. That import is updating those records. That's all done. In fact, let's go back to our Joe record, and you'll see there's the Traverse City that we added in that import. That is it for this first run on the 9.6 changes coming in 2020. In the next round, we'll go over some of the purchasing, receiving, and quick receive tools that have shifted a little bit, some new exciting additions to those. I'll go ahead and close this one out, and we'll see you in the next video.